The day Beirut exploded, the silos remained. For 50 years, dozens of white, 157-foot-tall cylinders presided over Beirut's port and held much of Lebanon's grain, landmarks in a city that had lost many of them to civil war or pitiless development. For Lamia Ziade, an illustrator and visual artist, they were the touchstone she would glance at every time she looked out the window of her grandmother's house on Pasteur Street. They were the gate of Beirut. You saw them from the sea, the air, whenever you would go from one side of the city to the other, said Ziade, 53, who was born and raised in the Lebanese capital and now lives in Paris. They were like the pyramids, like the Eiffel Tower of Beirut. Every time I passed them, I would think how lucky we were to have this sentinel, these silos, protecting us. A year ago, they did exactly that when, at 6:08 p.m. August 4, 2020, some 755 tons of ammonium nitrate carelessly stored in the port's Hangar 12 exploded. The blast, the third largest non-nuclear explosion in history, pushed out a fireball miles into the air, followed by a hemispherical shockwave that raced inland for 6 miles at supersonic speed. It ripped walls off buildings and transformed houses into deadly cyclones of glass shards and wood splinters. It flicked aside cars, trucks and even a lumbering cruise ship like so many marbles. The disaster left more than 200 people dead, thousands wounded and 300,000 homeless. The silos, located less than 250 feet from the blast's epicenter, acted as a shield for the western part of the city, and stayed standing. They still do, barely. Leaning more by the day toward the sea, their disemboweled husks now hang, like the country, in a state of slow-motion collapse. And whether to raze or preserve them has raised urgent questions about how best to remember that Tuesday evening and its still unresolved aftermath. People have an emotional connection to the silos. After the explosion, the attachment with the structure increased, said Gioia Sawaya, a Lebanese architect and researcher. With the blast, we lost more than houses and part of our city. What is important is not to lose the social relationships and connections that keep us intact as Lebanese. The silos, with the collective memory they carry, are a wake-up call. For many shell-shocked residents, the silos that were once a symbol of national promise have instead become a monument to the decades of official negligence and systemic corruption that allowed such an enormous quantity of ammonium nitrate, a chemical used in agricultural fertilizer but also in bombs, to be unsafely stored for 7 years at Beirut's port. The silos, as a visible structure, were a reminder of how organized and proactive Lebanon was in its early days, said Abdul Halim Jabr, an urban designer and member of the Beirut Heritage Initiative, a group of architects and preservation experts. Now, he said, their meaning had become tragedy and devastation.